Today on the Gizmo Debrief podcast, we discuss Hamilton's Singapore Grand Prix win, the drama between the two Force India drivers, and the Indycar season finale at Sonoma. The Gizmo Debrief podcast is a podcast covering all things motorsport, from F1 to IndyCar to MotoGP. I'm Robert Draper, and my co-host is...
I'm Robert Nguyen.
Let's get into it. So, of course, the first thing we're discussing today is the Singapore Grand Prix. Everyone knows Hamilton won it, which was quite a surprise. We thought that... Well, who did you think was going to win this going into the weekekend, Rob?
Well, to be fair though, I originally thought that it was gonna be either the Ferraris or the Red Bulls, because we have seen their pace last year during qualifying, and a lot of people, I think myself as well, saw from Monaco and also other tracks that Mercedes design, which has the car is much longer than both the Red Bulls and the Ferraris, so it would compromise them in street circuits. And a lot of people thought that Mercedes were the third fastest team, and Singapore wasn't the track that really suited Mercedes for the past few years because of the temperature that doesn't suit the operating window for the tires. So I thought that this could be Vettel's chance to caught back to Hamilton in the championship, but unfortunately, it didn't happen today.
Yeah, it was quite a surprise when Hamilton put together that pole lap, and I mean, it was a dominant win. No one could really touch him. I mean, Verstappen closed up the gap with the whole scrap with Sirotkin, which we will get to later in the podcast, but it was a really dominant win from the Mercedes.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people did count on Lewis as the winner today. But to be fair, though, Lewis has been a tremendous driver, and he has a really good record back in Singapore. He won in 2009, he won in 2014, he won last year in an absolutely epic race in the rain. That was the first and only Singapore Grand Prix that we had other weather than rain, and also. A lot of people are also expecting a very close race this year because before the race, around 1 week, a lot of people were thinking that rain could be a big possibility because of the forecast that forecasted the weather in Singapore would be raining for the whole entire week. But then, for some reason, Hamilton pulled out that absolutely blistering qualifying lap, smashing Vettel's record by 3 seconds of last year, and also got on pole and got the perfect position for him to get the win.
Yeah, and I mean, people have always said that Vettel is the master of Singapore, but I think with these wins that Hamilton has had these past few years, he can really make a claim. I believe in the race, they said previously Vettel had the record for laps led at Singapore, but it was actually this race that Hamilton surpassed him. I don't know the exact number, but it was somewhere in the range of 200. So certainly this, as with most tracks, is a really good track for Lewis Hamilton. It's really, he excels at a lot of these street circuits other than really Monaco, but he's still good there. But thing like Canada is one of his best tracks. And I think it's kind of similar, and it's a very tight track and requires very technical driving, which really suits the incredible skill of Lewis Hamilton.
And I agree with you. And also we have to take into account that one of Vettel's victories in Singapore, it was back in 2012. I was in that race. Was sitting right near the old Singapore Sling chicane, and Vettel benefited from Hamilton. Hamilton actually started on pole back in 2012, and he retired with if I'm not wrong, it was a gearbox failure on the 12th lap, if I'm not wrong, and that put a huge blunder to Hamilton's title challenge back in 2012 as well, because he was having probably the best form that he could have. Like he just won back in Italy, and he kept one in Singapore, but that's the old story now. We're focusing on this year, 2018. So yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like you mentioned with Italy, since Spa, Mercedes at tracks that have really we all expected to favor Ferrari, such as Monza, Mercedes has had the upper hand. I mean, everyone thought that Ferrari was going to be the quickest car at Monza, and in a way they were. Mercedes was a little bit behind, and I think, and we'll get to this later, an argument could be made that Vettel was the fastest car. But still, they were a lot closer than people expected, and I think here people, as they were last year, expected them to be the third fastest car. And I don't know how much of that is down to Lewis Hamilton, and I don't know how much of that is down to like the advancements made by Mercedes and their technical partners. But certainly Mercedes has really made a jump, and I think we're seeing Mercedes really emerge as maybe not the best car, but it's certainly matching Ferrari, which is very different than what we had earlier in the season when the Ferrari was clearly the better car. Not by a large margin, but it was the better car.
And also, we also have to see that in terms of qualifying pace, Mercedes isn't the best, because we have seen they have been struggling most of the year, that they couldn't match the qual pace of both the Ferraris and also sometimes Red Bulls, but then what Mercedes lacks in one lap pace, they make it up during the race. They seemingly finding these seconds that they could catch their rivals, not only by race pace, but also strategically as well, as we have seen in Monza, how Ferrari blunder Raikkonen's race by forcing Raikkonen to run in a pretty much destroyed rear tire that was blistered at the latter stage of the race.
Yeah, and I think we also had Ferrari has clearly had, the party mode in qualifying so far. They've been the fastest car in qualifying. We can't forget that there have been a couple pole laps this year which have just been really special. One thinks back to in Australia when we all thought that, I mean, in preseason testing, everyone thought that Mercedes was going to dominate, and qualifying in Australia really made us think that, because I forget what the gap was, but he was several tenths ahead of the nearest competition. And there are those laps this season. I think back to like Belgium in the rain where Hamilton, I don't know the gap, I think it was around 7 tenths to the second place driver. I think this is one of those laps where it's the car is not the reason that car was on pole. The reason he's on pole is because Hamilton, I believe, is one of the best qualifiers of this generation, and I think he's up there of all time. I think obviously Senna is probably the best qualifier, but I think Hamilton, with these laps that he's been putting together, there's a really strong argument that he is one of the best qualifying drivers of all time.
And also, you really have to remember, Hamilton is now the current holder of the most poles of all time by any Formula 1 drivers. That it serves as a case that Hamilton is probably the best driver, having the one lap pace out of everyone. That is his strongest point. And when Hamilton get a good start during the race, he's untouchable during that race, and that makes it why Hamilton is probably I would say is the driver with the best form in Formula 1 right now.
Would you argue that he's the best single lap driver of all time?
I think it's debatable. I think every eras we will have like any driver who can fight up as the best driver with one lap pace. We have seen back in the 1980s we have Senna blistering those laps with those cars that during the first turbo eras that went over 1,000 horsepower. But then now we have Hamilton. But then each eras we have different cars and different technologies. But then one thing for sure, the drivers will be the one who takes care of the car. And Hamilton's, I believe, is one of the best ever driver in terms of one lap pace, in terms of qualifying.
Yeah, and one could really argue that that pole lap is part of what's putting the championship in reach for Hamilton. Is just these. There are certain tracks we knew that Mercedes was going to be strong at. We knew they were going to be strong at Spain. We knew they were going to be strong at like Paul Ricard, and those are wins they got. They got their safe wins. What's really helping Mercedes is at tracks where they didn't expect to be strong. Germany, Italy, Singapore, they're winning the races, and I think that's really what's putting them ahead of Ferrari and Sebastian Vettel. And I think it's debatable whether that's down to Hamilton being the best driver this season or Vettel just repeatedly making mistakes. And I think that it's really debatable, and I would be curious, where do you stand? Is this a championship that Hamilton's winning, or is this a championship that Vettel is losing?
I think that it's a combination of both. I think with Hamilton's form, he's driving his best form. He's driving his best ever form in his career. He's calculated. He knows what he needs to do, and he knows where his strengths at. And he makes sure that he takes all those possibilities, all those points that he needs to help with his championship. And also Vettel as well. We've seen Vettel make countless mistakes this season, and those mistakes cost him dearly. We've seen him locking up in Baku. We have seen him holding up signs and getting a 5-place grid penalty. We've seen Vettel cracking under pressure at Hockenheim, at Paul Ricard, in Monza, and now in Singapore. The track that a lot of people have put their money that Vettel will win and will get back into contention. Seemingly, Vettel is cracking under pressure right now, and I think if I will say 30% is Hamilton's ability as a driver, and 70% is Vettel cracking up under pressure.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with you. And I actually I did the numbers on this. Obviously, the biggest mistake that Vettel's made this year was obviously in Germany. That was an easy win. It was his home race. And I think Vettel's reaction to that on the team radio after he got out of the car, he was just dejected. You could hear it in his voice. That really says how big of a mistake that was. And I did the math. If he were to have, and if he hadn't have crashed, we all know he would have won that race. If he had won that race and Hamilton would have finished second, right now he would be in 8 points behind Hamilton. So, I mean, those mistakes add up. And, I mean, the next biggest mistake, we obviously think France. That's what caused Mercedes to, I don't know if they were serious, but to accuse Ferrari of playing dirty tricks, of deliberately taking out Mercedes.
And then Hamilton also accused Raikkonen of the same thing happened a few weeks later back in Silverstone.
Yeah. So, and that mistake, we obviously, we know what happened. Both those drivers had damage. They recovered to different extents. Obviously, Vettel recovered better than Bottas. But let's so for the purpose of this, let's assume Vettel wins the German Grand Prix. The French Grand Prix, let's say Mercedes, that was their race. They were very good there. So let's conservatively assume that Hamilton wins that race, which he did.
Yeah.
And Bottas finishes second if contact doesn't happen between the two. So Vettel would probably finish third. If he finishes third there, in addition to winning the German Grand Prix, there would currently be, he would be 3 points behind Hamilton right now.
Yeah.
And I mean, those are just two of the mistakes. There have been countless ones. And the next one, obviously, in Italy, that was Vettel's fault. Wouldn't you agree with that, Rob?
I agree with it. Vettel was way too aggressive at that point, and Vettel fully knew he was on the inside, and Hamilton will have the better exit outside. And Vettel just, I think he just cracking under pressure, because Hamilton is right next to him, and he knows the championship is on the line at that point, because he knew that he needs to finish. He needs to finish ahead of Lewis to get close to him in the championship, and we knew that Vettel had the car to win the Italian Grand Prix, and he just cracked it under pressure, and that costed him so dearly.
Yeah, and I agree with you. He had the car to win, and I mean, so we in our assumptions here, Vettel now has a 3-point deficit if he wins the German Grand Prix and finishes third in France. In Italy, let's conservatively say he finishes second.
Yeah.
Kimi was able to do that, and I think everyone would agree Vettel's a better driver than Kimi. So Vettel would finish second, let's say. Hamilton wins that race. If that were to happen, he would currently have a 3-point lead in the championship. So you can see what's going on. And just for the purposes of this podcast, I did the math on if he had won that race with Hamilton second, he would currently have a 17-point lead in the championship. And that's including Singapore. So, I mean, this is Vettel. This could have been a dominant championship for him, because that's not every mistake he made. I mean, if he had been solid and not making mistakes, he would have probably like a 20-point lead in the championship, even more right now. It's just he can't keep making mistakes if he wants to have a chance in 2019, especially with a arguably much more competitive driver coming into the second seat who's already said that he hopes to be a title challenger. I just don't see how Vettel can expect to win a 5th championship with this performance. Yeah, be closer to the microphone.
I think so, because I thought fully well that Vettel knew this. He knows how to deal with the pressure. He has been in this position before. Back in 2010, back in 2012, Vettel didn't have a great first half of the season. He was struggling, and he was way behind the championship. And we have seen Vettel capitalize on his rival's mistake back in 2010, back in 2012 to win the championship. And I expected Vettel to continue his form from Spa. The race he absolutely dominated the Mercedes. The race he passed Hamilton right on the first lap. And it seems weird that Vettel just like he keeps making mistakes weekend over weekend over weekend. It just baffled me that as a 4-time world champion, as a driver that he was in this spot many years ago. It just baffled that how many mistakes Vettel is making and how many points he's throwing away in this championship.
Yeah, and I mean, it's, to be honest, at this point, the championship is over. I mean, I'm not going to take credit for this, but I looked it up. If Vettel were to win every race for the rest of the season and Hamilton were to finish second at every race, Vettel would only win the championship by 2 points. And I mean, there are tracks in there that Mercedes are going to be better at. Vettel's not going to win every race for the ending of the season. I mean, Hamilton currently, just for people who don't know, he has a 40-point lead. With as many races to go as there are, there's not that many. I don't see how Vettel can win this championship still. I think it's barring some major issues for Hamilton, kind of on the same level as we saw for Vettel last year. I don't see how Vettel can win it. I think it's over at this point.
I think so, and it's Hamilton. It now switched from Vettel's championship to lose to Hamilton's championship to lose. Hamilton's and we know to the end of the calendar, there are tracks that Hamilton is especially strong. Austin is one of them. Hamilton has won Austin back in 2012, 2014, 15, 16, 17. It's a track that Hamilton crazily dominated for the past few years. And Vettel only won once back in Austin. And then we have Suzuka, which I think that it will be a very tight race between the two. Abu Dhabi, that's a track that Mercedes is especially strong in the past few years. And I think that I think the championship right now is over, and it's just a matter of time which race Hamilton will win, where Hamilton will win the championship.
So obviously, a major story at the race this week was the opening lap scrap between Esteban Ocon and Sergio Perez, and we've seen this before, especially last year. Those drivers really got into it with each other. They had, I think, was it 2 incidents where they had hit each other? I know there was Baku
and Spa,
yeah. But I mean, it's really starting to happen again. I mean, Force India, if they've taken the same action they took last year, which is the drivers are now no longer allowed to race each other. You're going to have to ask the pit wall to pass the other driver. And I mean, do you think this is, first of all, who do you think's at fault in this case, Rob?
I think this is a racing incident. It's a combination of 2 factors. In the race highlights, we couldn't have the chance to see Perez's point of view when he actually hit Ocon, and it was like around 3 or 4 hours after the race. Anthony Davidson, who was doing the post-race debrief for Sky, actually saw the incident from Perez's point of view, and it was actually during that point Perez just slightly oversteered, and Ocon was, I think Ocon was at the wrong place at the wrong time, and it was a racing incident, and it was unfortunate, but is racing. But I think that Perez is a part of blame because he could have left a bit more space. Ocon was really squeezing right inside the wall, and both combination, it became disaster for Force India.
Yeah, I think if it had been Perez racing against, say, a Haas driver, I think Perez would. There's no problem there. But because it was his teammate, and the same thing goes for Ocon, you have to be careful.
Yeah.
And neither of them were careful. And I'm guessing you agree, obviously, with the decision of no further action by the stewards. I agree with that too. But I mean, I think Force India, they made the right decision in stopping their drivers from doing that, because while they have been saved financially, it's got to hurt to lose those point hauls, especially with having all of their constructors' points be gone. I mean, they need to get as many points on the board as they can to increase their revenue for the remaining of the year, and they can't keep doing this. So I mean, do you agree with the decision by Force India?
Yeah, I agree, because since Force India just been reborn as Racing Point, the best thing for the team now is they have to score points. They have to score those valuable points to get as much revenue as possible. And Force India is right now the best car in Class B, the best car in the midfield, outside the top 3, and we have seen them wasting so many points in the past 2 seasons, last year and this year, because by fighting with each other. Last year actions in Baku cost them potentially a double podium, and that was absolutely unfortunate, because we fully know Baku was one of Force India's strongest track. Perez has scored podiums back in 2016 and this year as well. So, and also Spa-Francorchamps as well. And yeah, for both drivers can't keep doing this. And we know that both driver seats are on the line for next season, because we fully know Lance Stroll will jump into one of those seats. And it's now the case of who will be the second driver for Force India as well, and also as much revenue as possible for the team. So it's not only about revenue, it's also about drivers' integrity and performance for their future in Formula One as well.
Yeah, and obviously that incident ended Ocon's race. He was out of the race after that point. But as everyone knows, and it was quite exciting, that was not the end of Perez's race.
Yep.
He for those who didn't watch, Sergei Sirotkin, he had a piece of I think it was Ocon's wheel rim stuck on his front wing, and had to pit on lap 1 and put on the soft tires, and he got I don't know if he had a front wing change, but they had to do some work on the front wing, so it cost him a significant amount of time. So Ocon was pretty out of step strategically with the other cars. So when some of the slower,
I think you meant Sorokin.
oh yes, Sorokin, excuse me, and so when the slower midfield cars, I think it was Magnussen, Grosjean, Gasly, Hulkenberg was behind Sorokin too. When they did their pits, and they all did their pits on where you'd expect them to, they came out behind Sorokin, and I mean, credit to the guy. He drove brilliantly defensively, at least for that first part when he had that train of cars behind him. And I mean, Perez was getting pretty flustered there. He was saying that
Charlie Whiting, yeah,
he sounded like one of the leading guys when they're talking about blue flags. I mean, you can't get blue flags for position. Yeah. So I mean, what did you think of Sorokin's drive there?
I think he. First of all, I think I would have thought he would fully deserve driver of the day. We all knew that. A lot of people, if people didn't know, it was actually Verstappen who won drivers of the day. But then Sorokin, his defensive was brilliant today. And the Williams was 5 seconds off the pace of the pole time, and they were at least 1.5 seconds behind the slowest car of the midfield. And what Sorokin did today was absolutely amazing. He held his own ground, and he made a boring race actually exciting towards the middle part of the race. And I have to give full credit for Sorokin, because like how much as people criticize Sorokin moved to Williams, because like I think a lot of people still got salty that Sorokin got that seat because of Robert Kubica, because like a lot of people got really hyped up when Kubica was announcing he was going to return to Formula One, and people expected him to return to a racing seat because he was an absolute talent. But what Sorokin did today really changed my view. I have a very neutral stand on Sorokin. He's a great driver. He just had his best performance of the year in Italy, which he scored his first ever point. And now in Singapore, he did absolutely amazing. And I'm so happy that he is delivering these kinds of performance.
Yeah, it's great to see him performing like that. I mean, obviously we don't have, and even with Stroll, we can't really judge them this year because of how bad that car is. I mean, I don't know if they still have this problem, but earlier in the season, their floor was it was stalling. And I mean, I think it's like 40% of the downforce. That's probably incorrect, but it's a significant portion of the downforce comes from the floor and the diffuser. And if that is stalling, that car was just borderline undrivable. And I think people will say because of this season, oh, Sorokin's horrible, Stroll's horrible.
They're both paid drivers. Yeah.
And I mean, every driver on the grid's a paid driver. Every driver brings
sponsorship money.
Yeah. And I mean, it's really good to see him performing well. We don't have that good of an idea. Obviously, we can look back on his earlier single-seater performances, which were quite good. And I mean, there were other brilliant defensive drives from him in early single-seaters. It's as I said, it's great to see him performing well. And even though he did end up finishing last
and get the 5-second penalty with Hartley,
yeah, he at least in the first part of that defensive time, he drove pretty well. And I think the polar opposite of that was Perez. He really was putting it all on the line. I mean, you and I saw he was just diving up the inside and couldn't get anything done, and eventually got frustrated and hit Sorokin, and we all know what happened after that. He got the penalty.
He got a flat tire as well.
Yeah. What's your view on that incident?
I think Perez literally just lost his mind. Because like Sorokin had the position into the bridge, into left into the bridge, and for some reason, I think from a point of view, Perez tried to kind of intimidate Sorokin by swerving right to the left. So like it's kind of like a bit of like, you're a rookie and experienced drivers put you into their place. So like, but then I don't think, and Perez just really lost his mind, because that's something you don't do. Because like if you but have to give credit to Sorokin, he actually fought back. But yeah, I think it's stupid, and I think Perez shouldn't have done that. And he also cost himself a point finishing. He could have finished 9th or 10th today, to salvaging Force India at some point, but he ended up screwing himself, his race, and probably his reputation as well.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that was him just like red mist driving, or do you think that was deliberate? Like,
I don't think that Perez really deliberate. He just tried to kind of intimidate Sorokin, but it backfired massively
because Sorokin held his ground.
Yep.
And I mean, that's a running theme in that scrap. Sorokin, he held his ground, and I mean, further on, probably the most exciting moment of the race was when Hamilton was coming around. I don't know if it was his first time lapping them, but when he came up to lap that group of cars, Grosjean was the driver immediately behind Sorokin, and well, for those who didn't see the race, Hamilton was coming up on the cars, and before that, he had, I think it was around a 4 or 5 second gap back to Verstappen, and that car started to come down pretty quickly as he went through the cars following Sorokin. But when he got to Grosjean and Sorokin, he was losing over the 10th of a lap. He lost nearly 2 seconds to Verstappen, and Verstappen went from being way off in the distance to right on the diffuser of Hamilton. And blue flags were a big sticking point this race with like Bottas and everything. And obviously Grosjean got the penalty there. But I mean, it really spiced up the race with Sorokin, because Sorokin could have just let the Haas through. I mean, the Haas is such a faster car. And I mean, the proof of that isn't that they have the fastest lap, but Sorokin held his ground there, and it kind of screwed Grosjean over because he didn't let Hamilton through and got the penalty. But it was the most exciting part of the race. It would have been quite a snoozer if it wasn't for that. I mean, what's your take on that part?
I think it was probably the most exciting part of the race, because like it caught during that moment when Hamilton is about to lap them. Grosjean and Sorokin start fighting from the Raffles Boulevard until the turn 10 complex, the old Singapore Sling turn chicane. And it was absolutely amazing, because like we've seen Hamilton dominating that race. Like he had no challenge until that moment, and Hamilton was kind of pretty scared, because if he did something wrong, that is his championship going to waste. That's a 30-point gap going to waste, and Hamilton has to be careful, and he's right to be careful, because like any mistake he was going to make, if he wasn't careful, that would have been his championship. And then we have Verstappen, who we know is absolutely feisty, and we saw like Verstappen got a peek to Hamilton that he's got past, that he's thinking then I need to pass this guy, because this is my chance to shine, this is my chance to win. But he backed out. But at least it threw some spice into the race. It didn't really change the results, but at least like we had some fun in a kind of very doozy Singapore Grand Prix. Yeah,
and I mean, it very well could have really changed the result. I mean, Verstappen was, for those who didn't watch, he was right on the rear end of Hamilton. He got stuck behind Grosjean for a couple tenths of a second, and if it wasn't for that, he was in a position where he could have made a pass, because he was just that close. And it was in my opinion, and I think in yours too, it was the most exciting part of the race. So it hats off to Sorokin for that, really, because I mean, if it wasn't for that first lap incident and him getting that piece of wheel rim stuck in his front wing, it would have been a pretty boring race.
Yeah. And I think what Sorokin brought into this race really reminds me of how the 1980s and the 1990s era of Formula One, when there wasn't a blue flags, when the leaders they had to forcibly pass the blue flag guys, and it is actually it is actually exciting to see cars getting lapped fight for their position, and yeah, it threw some spice, and I love it. I love every moment of that fight between Grosjean, between Sorokin, and also with Hamilton and Verstappen going in as well.
Yep. And now moving on to some off-track news. Of course, the big news before the race was not that much of a shocker. Charles Leclerc is going to Ferrari for 2019. I mean, this has been rumored all season. At the beginning of the season, it people were saying, "Oh, it's a certainty," and then mid-season, people started to say, "Oh, they're going with Kimi," and then it swung back to them going with Charles Leclerc. But the real shocker for those who don't know, and if you don't know, you're living under a rock. Kimi Räikkönen is returning to Sauber, which was the team he entered Formula One in, and I was shocked by it, to be honest, because I mean there were the rumors that Kimi was interested in Sauber, and I just took it as rumors. That would have been a great story, but it's never going to happen. But it did. Kimi's returning to Sauber, and I think it's a major, major coup for Sauber. They have an amazing driver in Kimi. I mean, he's kind of past his prime, but he's still the best driver to be at Sauber since I don't even know. I mean, it's I don't know if obviously in 2013 they had Nico Hülkenberg and
Esteban Gutierrez.
Yeah, but Gutierrez wasn't that great. But in 2013, Hülkenberg, towards the end of the season, he was really putting in good performances. And I don't know where 2018 Kimi Räikkönen stacks up alongside 2013 Hülkenberg, but they're both fantastic drivers, and it's the best driver that Sauber's had in a while. And with the increased funding from Ferrari and the new owner, well, they're not really the new owners anymore, but the owners of Sauber, they're looking like they're going to be a midfield team next year. I mean, an argument could be made that they're a midfield team this year. I mean, what do you think of Kimi going to Sauber?
I think I didn't even expect Kimi to go back to Sauber. Kimi is entering that very old age now, that he's near retirement, and a lot of people thought that if Kimi is gonna win the Italian Grand Prix, I actually thought about it, that if Kimi won that, he would announce his retirement like Michael Schumacher back in 2006. But it's actually fun to see Kimi Räikkönen having it. We have seen Räikkönen driving in top equipment for so long. It's kind of weird to see Räikkönen getting back to midfield equipment, and I think what Sauber did was correct, because Räikkönen has tremendous experience, and we never seen a driver that experienced like Kimi since shall we say 2008, 2009, Nick Heidfeld and Robert Kubica.
Yeah.
So and also what Kimi's bringing is amazing, because he's one of the most well-known drivers in Formula One, and he can attract sponsors, which Sauber probably will need for their financial and for their development as well. So it's great, but I felt a bit bad that who will take the second seat at Sauber though. Is either Marcus Ericsson or Antonio Giovinazzi, because both are very good drivers. Ericsson really showed up why he deserves a seat in Formula One this season. And Giovinazzi, well, we have been waiting for an Italian driver to return to Formula One for so long, since Jarno Trulli back in 2011. And I just hope that whoever Sauber pick, who will partner Räikkönen next year, I hope that they will make the correct decision. But also I don't want Giovinazzi to be another case of Davide Valsecchi as well. So yeah, but it's through a major curveball into the 2019 Formula One silly season.
Yeah, and the thing is, we don't even know if Sauber has authority over that seat, because everyone always says that Ferrari has complete control over one of the seats at Sauber, and everyone thought that when this deal was announced that was the Ferrari seat that Kimi was going towards, and it emerged that it wasn't. That's the seat that Ericsson currently occupies. So it leads me to think that it's probably going to be Giovinazzi. But the thing is that Giovinazzi, according to Vettel, he's the main reason why they've been turning around those lackluster Fridays into really good Sundays. Because Giovinazzi has been a fantastic sim driver. And I don't know if Ferrari's willing to give that up. Obviously, Giovinazzi has said that he wants to be known as a Formula One driver, not a driver in a simulator. But it would be a big blow to Ferrari, especially with the rumors that Daniel Kvyat is going to Toro Rosso, because he's the other test driver.
Yeah.
And I mean, in this era of Formula One, the sim driver is what the test driver used to be in like the early 2000s. They do
a setup.
Yeah, setup, because the simulators are so accurate that they're able to get realistic setup data. And I don't know if Ferrari is going to give Giovinazzi up. That's the big thing, and it's kind of bad for him. He's almost too good for his own good in his current role.
And I think it will be such a shame to see Giovinazzi not making it to Formula One. We have seen Giovinazzi done very well in his two only appearances for Sauber, subbing in for Pascal Wehrlein. And it's kind of like a bit of a conundrum in Formula One right now, where talents are now, they're now getting dropped by it's politics, money, is Formula One. I think it's unfortunate because we're now seeing like Ocon might face a chance that he might not get a seat in Formula One next season. We have seen Pascal Wehrlein now. Pascal Wehrlein now is back in DTM, and he is close to out of his Mercedes contract, which is such a shame because Wehrlein was the reason why Manu was so good back in 2016, and a lot of people thought Wehrlein could be the one who will the one that Vettel will pass the torch in the future as the next great German driver. It's such a shame that a lot of young drivers, a lot of young and talented drivers are getting dropped. And Giovinazzi, we have seen him in his only season in GP2. He went toe to toe with someone everyone knew is the star of the future, Pierre Gasly, who got the promotion to Red Bull. And and I just hope that Giovinazzi will have the chance and not be like Davide Valsecchi.
Yeah. And moving on to our last topic for today, for those of you who aren't IndyCar fans, Scott Dixon won his 5th IndyCar title in it was all right race. The Alexander Rossi was his closest rival in the championship. Of course, Will Power and Joseph Newgarden were also mathematically in contention, but it would have taken a real miracle for either of them to have won the championship. But Rossi was truly in contention, and it looked like he might be able to challenge Dixon. He didn't have the greatest qualifying. Of course, Dixon qualified second, but he had a fast car. But for those of you who didn't watch the race, I believe it was lap 1, Rossi collided with Marco Andretti and had suffered a
front wing damage
and a puncture. So he fell back to the bottom of the grid, and while he did work his way back, it wasn't enough. Dixon, he came around to win the championship. And I mean, hats off to Dixon. I mean, he is one of the best IndyCar drivers of the modern era. Hands down the best IndyCar driver of the modern era. And it's really good to see him succeeding because he's a big name for the sport. Obviously, it would have been really good for IndyCar to have a American driver win the championship, especially one with the profile of Rossi after winning the
Indy 500.
Indy 500. But yeah, it's good to see the sport's greats going out and setting records. I mean, what's your take on Scott Dixon winning his 5th title?
I think I'm generally happy because Scott Dixon, not only for IndyCar, a lot of people generally thought that Scott Dixon is probably one of the greatest ever driver to never have reached Formula One. Like Dixon dominated and in contention for every championship since shall we say his first season with Chip Ganassi, 2003 maybe, and the performance of Dixon is absolutely amazing. How he keeps performing on the same level for so many seasons is absolutely crazy. And his fifth IndyCar championship really, really set the bar way high. And I agree with you. That he is right now the greatest ever modern IndyCar driver of all time. Like all the accolades that he has got, and what he has achieved in IndyCar is special. And I think it will take a long time that we will see someone like him dominating IndyCar.
Yeah, the only person I can think of is obviously the guy we all expect to come to IndyCar next year, Fernando Alonso. I mean, he has the talent to do it, but I don't know if he had come to IndyCar at a younger age, I think he could have matched Dixon's championship titles. I don't think Fernando has another 5 years in him racing at the level he's at right now. But yeah, I mean, Dixon's just at a level where there's no one comparable to him in the IndyCar series. His talent is just at such a level. He could have, like you said, he could have been a Formula One driver. He could have been quite a Formula One driver. I don't know if he could have
multiple winners.
Yeah, I don't know if he could have won a championship, but he would have probably been on the level of someone like Sergio Perez, who I think is underrated. He would have, if he had been put in like the position that Bottas is in, I think he would have won races.
Yeah, I think. I would say Dixon is a bit more like Daniel Ricciardo, though. But then it's amazing that how good Dixon is over the years. Like during his span in the IndyCar, we've seen great drivers coming in and go. We've seen Helio Castroneves. We have seen Helio Castroneves, Dario Franchitti. Let's see, Sam Honest Jr. And like all those amazing moments that Wilson Dixon, though, like he seemingly found something that other drivers couldn't. He seemingly found like that eternal youth that he has, and I'm generally happy. Like IndyCar found someone like that he represents IndyCar. He basically represents IndyCar. Like they have the talent, and he has the talent, and he can do great things. And I'm happy that Dixon won his fifth title. It cemented his legacy. It cemented him as one of the greatest ever open wheel racer in IndyCar history.
Yeah, and moving on to another story that happened prior to the Singapore Grand Prix. Fernando Alonso, of course, had his test at Barber Motorsports Park in a Andretti IndyCar, and he seemed to love it. But some news has come out recently that there are a couple obstacles to McLaren entering IndyCar along with Fernando Alonso. We all know that Fernando Alonso was pretty heavily critical of Honda, and I think it was pretty telling that when he tested that IndyCar, although it did have a Honda engine, all of the Honda branding on the car was removed. And I think part of that is to do with him being currently under contract with Toyota, which is Honda's main rival. But I think a big part of that is the criticism that we've seen from Fernando directed at Honda. And I really hope that doesn't prevent him from coming to IndyCar next year, because people were speculating that Andretti might buy out Harding to have that as the McLaren team. But with the results that Harding has been having, and with signing drivers that like Herta and O'Ward, I really don't think that's going to happen. I think there's some big obstacles in the way of Fernando coming to IndyCar next year.
Yeah, I have to agree the same. Fernando's comments is really come to bite him. Like we all know Fernando is great in his debut lap last year at the Indy 500, and we all know that Fernando is probably probably the most talented driver. If he actually comes to IndyCar, will be the most talented driver, and he will be the one eyeing for that title, and also the Indy 500. But yeah, it's kind of interesting how racing is politically is messy. It's kind of fun, but I just hope that Fernando, I just hope that Honda just like take another chance, and Honda and Fernando can compromise and take another chance with each other, because Honda engines is probably the best in IndyCar right now, and Alonso, and Alonso is one of the best drivers in the world, and if they could find success, I think it'll be good. But they really need to compromise what really happened back in those days. With McLaren doing the super disastrous second era of Honda in Formula One.
Yep, and that's our podcast for this week. Make sure to follow us or subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us and like us on social media. This has been the Gizmo Debrief podcast, hosted by Robert Draper and
Robert Nguyen.